paradrama tales.
My family forced me to take beatings for my siblings' crimes, calling it tradition. That sentence sounds insane, right? But for me, it was just another Sunday night. While the town saw my dad as a decorated cop and proud father, I knew the truth. I was the sacrifice he offered to protect their image of a perfect family. I was the youngest of four, the one everyone called the strong one. Not because I had a voice, but because I learned how to stay quiet. My dad was a decorated police officer, the kind of man who polished his service medals every Sunday like they were sacred relics. He'd inherited a brutal sense of discipline from his own father, a Vietnam veteran who ran his household like a military boot camp. One person bears the burden, so the unit stays strong, he used to say. And that person was always me. In our house, accountability meant pain, and my job was to absorb it. My mom, she didn't stop it. She came from the same system, except in her family, it was the eldest daughter who took the hits. So when Dad laid out the rules, she didn't argue. She just stood by the wall, counting each strike out loud, like she was measuring ingredients for a recipe, not helping to beat a child. They called it tradition. They called it love. They called it building resilience. I had a different name for it, hell. My siblings Marcus, Diana, and Gabriel weren't born cruel. They were just smart enough to understand the system. And over time, they learned how to use it. At first they cried when I was hit. Then they looked away. Eventually they stopped pretending to care. Marcus started skipping school, knowing I'd take the punishment. Diana sold Mom's jewelry for concert tickets without blinking. Gabriel once failed 3 tests on purpose just to see how many times I'd flinch. Every Sunday night at 7 p.m., Dad would drag a chair into the living room, push the furniture aside, and make me stand barefoot in the center of the cold floor. He'd read a list of offenses, curfews, missed homework, ignored rules, broken, and I'd brace myself as the belt came down. The number of strikes matched their sins, but the pain was always mine. Sometimes I'd see it in their eyes, guilt mixed with relief. They didn't have to carry it. I did. They said it made us closer, that it built family bonds, but it didn't. It built walls. It taught me not to trust the people I was supposed to love. It taught them that consequences were optional when you had a scapegoat. By the time I was 7, I flinched whenever anyone raised their hand near me. My teachers noticed. They saw the bruises, the way I walked, the way I sat stiff in my chair. But they didn't ask questions. After all, I was the daughter of Officer Thompsontown hero, PTA volunteer basketball coach in the off-season. Who would believe me? So I kept it all inside. I marked every scar with colored pencils in a secret calendar under my mattress. Red for Marcus, purple for Diana, green for Gabriel. My body became a living ledger of everyone else's mistakes. And through it all, I told myself, this was just how families worked until the day I realized I wasn't a sister. I was a shield. The signs were always there, but I didn't know how to read them at first. I thought my siblings loved me. I thought they hated watching me get hurt, that they flinched when the belt cracked across my skin, just like I did. But slowly things changed. It wasn't just that they stopped trying to protect me, it was that they started using me. Marcus, the oldest, used to sneak into my room at night and promise he'd tell Dad it wasn't my fault. But those promises vanished once he realized he could cut class and never face a consequence. Diana started dressing nicer, wearing makeup, going to concerts she swore she paid for herself. But I knew what those earrings were, the ones she stole from Mom's drawer. Gabriel, the baby of the family, until I came along, got crueler with every prank. He'd laugh while Dad lectured me, whisper jokes under his breath while I stood shivering in the center of the room, waiting for the first hit. Dad called it accountability hour. Every Sunday at 7 p.m., sharp the living room transformed, furniture shoved to the sides, lights on bright. I was placed barefoot in the middle, wearing only a tank top and shorts so the belt would teach better. He read the week's offenses like a judge handing down a sentence, and my siblings sat in a row on the couch, eyes forward, hands folded, pretending this was justice. Sometimes I looked at them, searching for a flicker of remorse, a glance anything human, but all I saw was relief. The kind of relief that only comes when someone else takes your place on the gallows. My mom sat nearby, counting each strike out loud, as if the sound of numbers could sterilize the violence. She never looked at me. She looked through me. At school, I became the quiet one. I flinched when someone raised their hand too fast. I kept my sleeves pulled down even in summer. A teacher once asked if everything was okay at home, but the moment she mentioned talking to my father, I panicked and told her I was just clumsy. What else could I say? No one wanted to believe the smiling officer with the clean uniform and community awards was capable of cruelty. I started keeping track of everything. A hidden calendar under my bed, color-coded by sibling. Red for Marcus, purple for Diana, green for Gabriel. My skin bore the proof, the welts, the bruises, the way I limped for days after accountability hour. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was the growing realization that I was no longer their sister. I was their insurance policy. The buffer between their bad choices and real consequences. The moment it clicked was small but brutal. Gabriel had just graffitied the principal's car, on my birthday no less. And that night, as Dad unbuckled his belt, Gabriel laughed. Actually laughed. At least I don't have to deal with this, he said, like it was a joke. And my siblings. They didn't flinch. They didn't protest. They avoided my eyes as if I were a stranger. That's when I knew I wasn't being protected. I was being used. That night, something inside me snapped. I had spent 10 years believing that if I just endured long enough, anyone would step in. That if I stayed quiet, stayed loyal, stayed strong, the people I loved would love me back. But when Gabriel laughed as Dad reached for his belt and Marcus didn't even look up from his phone, I understood the truth. I wasn't a sister. I wasn't a daughter. I was a dumping ground. So I did the only thing I could think of. I ran. Barefoot in my punishment clothes, my skin still stinging from the last strike, I bolted out the front door and into the freezing February night. I didn't stop to grab shoes, didn't stop to think. I just ran. My lungs burned, the pavement bit into my feet, but the cold was nothing compared to what I was leaving behind. I made it to my teacher's house, Mrs. Lee, the only adult who had ever looked at me like I was more than just someone's kid. When she opened the door, she didn't say a word. Just wrapped me in a lavender-smelling blanket and made hot chocolate while I sobbed. I showed her the bruises, fresh ones, old ones, some still yellowing around the edges. She didn't flinch. She didn't doubt. She photographed everything with the calm precision of someone who knew she needed proof. Then she looked me in the eye and said something I'll never forget. We believe survivors. But the system, it believes evidence. And just like that, we had a plan. Over the next few weeks, I became a spy in my own home. Mrs. Lee gave me a voice recorder, tiny, no bigger than a thumb drive, and I wore it in my sock like a secret weapon. I recorded everything. Dad ranting about family honor, Mom counting strikes, Gabriel joking about whether I'd cry this time, Marcus asking if his college housing forms had been signed before casually lying to a CPS worker. Even Diana stone cold and detached, talking about how drama made her look bad on social media. But Dad was already ahead of me. He'd scheduled a psychological evaluation for me weeks before CPS ever showed up. By the time the caseworker arrived, he had a neat stack of documents painting me as unstable attention, seeking emotionally disturbed. Mom played her part perfectly, nodding, crying, adding details about my so-called episodes. And when the CPS worker Catherine asked to speak to me alone, Dad refused, citing safety concerns. His hand rested casually on his service weapon the entire time. My siblings chimed in like trained actors, concerned, confused, supportive of their poor, troubled sister. The system didn't see a victim. They saw a manipulative child trying to tear down a hero cop's perfect family. And I sat there silent, the truth burning in my chest, while my evidence waited quietly upstairs, buried in a shoebox. The bruises on my back throbbed under my shirt. I could have shown them. I could have screamed. But I knew that wouldn't save me. Not yet. The time for screaming was coming. But first, I had to survive. I knew the truth wasn't enough. It had to be undeniable. The bruises, the flinching, the panic attacks, even the recordings. None of it mattered if no one wanted to believe. So I kept collecting evidence, building a case the way Dad had taught me, ironically methodical, precise, unstoppable. Every time he rehearsed his lies with Mom late at night, I recorded it. Every time Gabriel joked about my beatings, or Diana vented about how I was ruining her social media image, I pressed record. I even captured the moment Dad practiced his CPS interview, voice cracking on cue, choosing where to pause for dramatic effect. He coached Mom like a director feeding lines to an actor, and she followed every prompt perfectly. The more I listened, the more I realized this wasn't just a toxic home, it was a production. A family play with me, cast as the unstable antagonist. But while I was documenting, Dad was adapting. He started searching my room for self-harm tools, but I knew it was about control. He changed school pickup procedures so only he could sign me out. He confiscated phones during dinner to prevent cyberbullying, but really it was to block me from sharing the truth. And when word started leaking through Mrs. Lee through concerned neighbors, he retaliated. Mrs. Lee got reported anonymously for inappropriate interest in a student. My counselor, who once cared, suddenly began suggesting I focus on studies instead of creating drama. Friends drifted away after their parents got favors from Dad, restraining orders, expedited tickets, dismissed recommendations written. Everyone had a price, and Dad knew how to pay it. Even my own siblings became tools in his campaign. Marcus fed CPS lines about my emotional outbursts, and Diana posted curated clips of me, crying edited for maximum drama. The town turned against me. The grocery clerk who used to smile now avoided eye contact. Neighbors whispered. Teachers documented me, falling asleep in class, another mark against me. And through it all, my recorder sat, hidden, growing heavier, with truth that no one wanted to hear. The breaking point came when I tried using Mrs. Lee's old phone to secretly record Dad at dinner. A beep slipped through too soft for most ears, but not his. His eyes locked on me, his posture tightening like a spring. I lied. Said I was using the calculator. He didn't call me out, but the next day he banned all devices from the table and locked them in his room at night. Another escape route sealed shut. I felt trapped, every breath monitored, every move scrutinized. But even then I didn't stop. Because tucked in that shoebox under my drawings was everything the audio proof, the whispers, the plans, the laughter at my expense. And when the day finally came, when I played that recording for everyone to hear, I needed them to know I wasn't delusional. I wasn't unstable. I was the only one telling the truth, and I'd been telling it alone for far too long. The night I played the recording was the night everything cracked. I waited until the family meeting, our twisted Sunday ritual, when Dad was in full command, voice steady eyes, sharp laying out another week's worth of sins and sacrifices. But instead of standing in the center of the room, waiting for the belt, I reached into my pocket, pulled out the recorder, and pressed play. His voice filled the air, calm, calculated, rehearsing how to cry on cue for the CPS interview. The sound was surreal, like watching a puppet master get caught in his own strings. Mom gasped. Gabriel froze. Diana covered her ears like she could block out the truth. But Marcus, he looked at me. Not with shock, but something closer to shame. And then Dad lunged forward, slamming his fist on the table, demanding to know how I dared to record our private family moments. The irony of it all, him calling me deceptive, while his own lies echoed from the speakers, wasn't lost on me. That night, things changed fast. Mrs. Lee filed a formal complaint when she spotted Dad parked outside her home for hours and his patrol car headlights off engine running. CPS reopened the investigation this time, bringing a different caseworker, who wasn't already tangled in Dad's web. I showed her everything: photos, voice memos, journal entries, even Marcus's college essay. That was the most unexpected piece he had written, about the moral injury of watching injustice unfold in his own home, of benefiting from someone else's suffering. He didn't name me. He didn't have to. His words dripped with guilt and truth, and when the social worker asked him directly about our family, he didn't lie. Marcus described everything: how the punishments were planned, how I was the designated scapegoat, how Mom and Dad orchestrated stories to cover up the abuse. When he pulled out his phone and played a few of his own secret recordings, Gabriel crying after one of my beatings, Mom calmly counting out belt strikes, there was no denying it anymore. Gabriel turned pale. Diana screamed at Marcus for betraying the family, pulling up her sleeves to show fresh cuts, and blaming me for everything unraveling. But it didn't matter. The truth was out. And it was louder than all of them combined. The police department launched an internal review, though not out of justice, just damage control. Officers who once called Dad a hero suddenly remembered concerns. His partner admitted to seeing red flags. And while Dad's badge wasn't taken, it was tarnished. He was reassigned to desk duty, a shell of the authority he once flaunted. At home, the power balance shifted. No more accountability hours. No more unchecked control. CPS placed me under emergency protection, bouncing between Mrs. Lee's home and temporary foster care, while the court battle unfolded. Even then, Dad tried to spin the story. He filed papers accusing Mrs. Lee of manipulating me. But this time, the court had more than just my word. They had voices. They had documents. They had guilt recorded and time-stamped. I wasn't just a kid with bruises anymore. I was a witness, and they couldn't silence me now. The aftermath didn't feel like justice. It felt like wreckage. Dad didn't go to prison. The charges stuck, but they were reduced misdemeanor, assault, mandatory counseling, 2 years, probation, loss of custody, not parental rights. The judge called it a complicated case with nuanced dynamics, as if my bruises and recordings weren't clear enough. Mom stood by him in court, her hand in his like none of it had ever happened. The sentencing wasn't the victory I dreamed of. It was a quiet, heavy compromise. But it was still a crack in the armor he'd worn for decades. The hero cop was now the cautionary tale. No longer praised in community newsletters, no longer smiling in Facebook posts about youth mentorship. His patrol car stayed parked more often, his badge collecting dust on a desk. We sold the house, the one with the hardwood floors that echoed every Sunday night with pain, and the proceeds were divided through court order. Another family moved in, painting over the walls that once held motivational posters Dad had put up for show. Diana moved in with our cousin, trying to get away from everything. I didn't blame her. Her arms, once covered in bracelets and polish, now hid scars she stopped trying to explain. She messaged me months later, not to apologize, but just to say she hoped I was okay. That was her way of reaching across the silence. Gabriel stayed with Mom and Dad. He was still too young for social services to place him elsewhere. He kept playing basketball, still coached by the man who used to make him watch his baby sister get beaten. But something in him dimmed. His game changed. His laugh sounded different. I think he saw now what he had been part of. Or maybe what he never stopped being. Marcus got out. He moved into a studio near campus and started working 2 jobs to make it work. We didn't talk about the years of silence between us, but he showed up when it mattered, and maybe that was enough. He dedicated his essay, the one that helped crack our family open, to those who survive quietly. I knew who that was meant for. As for me, I stayed with Mrs. Lee. The adoption took months, endless background checks, home studies, financial audits, but in the end, it became real. On a quiet Thursday in a small courtroom, with no reporters and no drama, she became my legal guardian. No confetti, no applause. Just the sound of a judge signing papers and a deep, quiet sense of safety I'd never known before. We went for pizza afterward to the same place where Dad once grabbed my wrist in front of an entire restaurant. The manager recognized me. He didn't say much, just smiled and brought over extra breadsticks. A small act. But it felt like reclaiming something. My scars didn't fade, but the flinch did slowly then, all at once. The world didn't erase what had happened, but it softened around the edges. And for the first time in my life, I started dreaming not of escape, but of a future. A real one I could shape with my own hands. 6 months after the final hearing, I stood at a podium in a community center staring out at a room full of strangers who weren't really strangers. At all, survivors, advocates, kids like me, who knew what it meant to be silenced. My voice trembled at first. I wasn't used to being heard. But as I told my story about the bruises, the silence, the weaponized love, I felt something shift. People listened. Not with pity, but with understanding. I spoke about cycles, how they don't break on their own, how sometimes it takes one person willing to lose everything to start the unraveling. I talked about Mrs. Lee in the lavender blanket, about the calendar under my mattress, about the recorder that captured my family's secrets in cold, metallic clarity. And when I finished, the room didn't erupt in applause. They just stood with me, quietly. And that silence was louder than any cheer. My 18th birthday came and went without a single call from my parents. No text, no card, nothing from Diana. Though I did see her post something vague about healing on social media. Gabriel sent a birthday card with no return address. Just a simple happy birthday sis, no apology. But maybe it was the closest he could come. Marcus, though, he showed up. Not with a present, but with moving boxes and takeout. He helped me pack for college. We didn't talk about the past, just meal plans and class schedules. It was enough. Mrs. Lee made my favorite dinner that night, lasagna with garlic bread, and handed me the last envelope from the scholarship fund her friends had helped create. First-generation student. Independent status, the form said. I checked the boxes and realized I was officially free. Not because the system had saved me, but because I had outlasted it. That night, I found the old calendar under my mattress, the one with colored pencil marks for every time I took a hit that wasn't mine. Red for Marcus, purple for Diana, green for Gabriel. I didn't burn it. I didn't throw it away. I tucked it into a file box with my court papers and therapy notes. Not as a weight, but as a reminder of what I came from, of what I'll never allow again. We drove past the courthouse, the police station, the pizza shop, the house that now belonged to someone else. Every building carried ghosts, but they couldn't follow me past the edge of town. When we pulled into campus, I took a deep breath. My dorm was small. My roommate was a stranger. No one here knew about belts or accountability hour or lavender-scented blankets. And that was the miracle I got to start fresh. No explanations, no flinching. Just a new bed, a locked door, and the chance to choose who I'd become. That night, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the dorm, the hum of a mini fridge, someone laughing down the hall, my roommate's soft snore. And for the first time in years, I didn't brace for pain. I didn't count breaths or calculate escape routes. I just existed, safe, whole, alive. And when the morning light poured through the window, I took a photo and sent it to Mrs. Lee. Her reply came seconds later, just a row of heart emojis. I stared at the screen and smiled, because this chapter was finally mine to write. If this story moved you, even just a little, please consider subscribing to the channel. Every like, comment, and share helps bring more awareness to the voices that often go unheard. These aren't just stories. They're lived experiences of survival, resilience, and the fight for truth. And for every person who speaks out there, are thousands still afraid to. By engaging with these videos, you're not just supporting the storyteller, you're helping others feel less alone. So, hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join a community that believes in listening, healing, and growing together. Got a story of your own? Leave a comment or reach out. We read everything. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is tell the truth and be heard.